Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast. So this weekend was the Chinese Grand Prix. We actually just watched it this morning because it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning for us, and we did not stay up that late. No. So, everything this weekend, I think the only thing we watched live was the sprint.
Yeah.
Everything else we had to watch later on.
Yeah, I think I was going to try to stay up for FP1, and then I was weak. But
I mean, that was at 10:30 to 11:30 our time on a Thursday, and I'm a tired person.
I had been in office that day, guys.
Yeah, same. Me too.
I was in bed and passed out by 9:30.
Yeah, I mean, that's me most nights, but
anyways. Yeah, I mean, I feel like most people feel the pain of having to not watch it live.
I think there's at least one race for everybody that they...
If not more.
Yeah.
Certain parts of the world really struggle. Condolences, Australia.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I enjoyed it.
I thought it was really nice to see something different.
So, here's the thing. I enjoyed the Chinese Grand Prix. I don't think I enjoyed the sprint.
Well, yeah, so just to preface, this week was the first sprint race of the year, and the sprint format is different this year, at least way that the format, the whole weekend goes.
I don't even know if it's the new format or
I think
the
it's
fact
the new format
that
for me.
So much information that, I into filming this episode today, I was like, oh my god, I don't even remember what happened in sprint and quali. It's just, I do kind of get why, people are having issues with the sprint weekends.
It's too much.
It's so much,
I can't even imagine what the drivers feel because...
Or the teams.
The way that the sprint weekends work now, they have the sprint race in the morning, and then in the afternoon, 4 hours later, then they have qualifying for the full-on race the next day. And so if you crash during the sprint race, you are not going to have a car, most likely, for qualifying. And qualifying for the actual race definitely matters more points-wise.
What was it last year?
It was, so last year the way the weekend worked was free practice, qualifying for the Grand Prix weekend, and then it was the sprint qualifying in the morning, and then the actual sprint race in the afternoon, and then Sunday morning was the race, which you qualified for on Friday.
Yeah, it might be the way it's it feels like it's so many, it feels like this sprint, it doesn't feel like the same race weekend.
No.
That's the problem I'm having.
Because then also, why would you... I'll say this when we talk about the sprint.
Yeah. But anyways, I think overall, especially for those that listened in to our episode or get ready for the Grand Prix, people kind of had positive things to say about it, but I think they were kind of looking at it a little bit it does have statistically some of the lowest attendance. It was in an industrial part of Shanghai, but I will say it's been 5 years since the last Grand Prix. We were not fans of the sport for the last Grand Prix, so unfortunately we do not have, our own personal comparison.
Yeah.
But I thought, it was a beautiful weekend.
I thought it was great.
I thought we had so much support for the hometown hero.
Yeah.
I think that, it seemed like everyone was kind of commenting that in the 5 years, it seems like F1's gotten even bigger in
100%.
China. And so, it was a sold out event, and yeah, it was incredible.
It was.
I think they really came out in support. So yeah, I really liked it. I enjoyed it, but again, I think the format kind of was a little overwhelming.
I don't think that this format will continue after this year.
I mean, they're going to change it for the next 10 years, and then they're going to scrap sprints entirely.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
But
anyways, we are going to do a typical episode.
Rundown.
Yeah, just a normal, free practice I mean, free practice is going to take like 2 seconds to talk about. Like,
Yeah.
quite literally nothing happened.
No, there was 2 funny things that happened. Well,
I think
not
we
funny.
can combine the sprint qualifying and the sprint into one.
Segment.
Yeah, for all of you guys, so it's easier.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get
Like
broken
that we're
up
doing
too
this
much.
on the fly for
Yeah,
our,
I know. That's sorry about that.
for our 12
Anyways.
fans to hear. Yeah, so let's get into the race weekend info.
All right, Mary Catherine.
All right, so we are into race 5 of the calendar. That alone, I cannot believe. I feel like we've sat through like 10 at this point. Like I can't believe
Race
it's only been
weekends have
5.
felt very overwhelming. I don't know if it's because we had like last year when we would watch race weekends, it was like the excitement of like being interested in a new sport, and it was so exciting, and that was like our whole life. And recently, I feel like, I don't know if it's because we've had like 2 months off and we weren't doing anything, and then now we're back to this. I feel like race weekends have been so overwhelming, and there's so much going on.
I do think last season, because we were so new and we were so learning, we would like shut down socially on race weekends.
Yeah, we
whereas
would.
now, you know, for those that care, we have more friends now. But like we're literally we're busier like in our own personal lives. So I think like that's the thing, you know, we're amateurs doing this, you know, for fun
Obviously.
on the side. It's very obvious if you couldn't tell.
We're literally filming on a Canon G7X.
But I think that like it's busier, and I also just feel like we're probably paying even closer attention.
Well, and I think after watching so many races now, like I can understand why some people will say that F1 gets boring sometimes.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like, it not being our first season, seeing races happen in the same way, it's like, okay, Max is gonna win.
Yeah, no, and that's the problem, is that I think F1 is trying to find ways to not make it boring, and they're not finding ways.
Yeah.
Because, again, they're waiting for 2026. But anyways, that's a whole different thing.
Get into
So
where
we are. So, Race 5, Chinese Grand Prix, the official race name is Formula 1 Lenovo Chinese Grand Prix 2024. The circuit we're at is the Shanghai International Circuit, and the first F1 Grand Prix at this circuit was in 2004. This circuit was built specifically to bring F1 to China. I don't believe a lot of events happen at it, to be candid. I just think it's there for the Grand Prix. So yeah, the circuit length is 5.451 kilometers or 3.39 miles. The number of laps they had to do this weekend was 56, and the distance of 56 laps ends up being 305.066 kilometers or 189.55 miles. The lap record, which was not broken this weekend, so it's still in place, was put, which honestly, knowing about this time, granted wind is a huge factor at this circuit, seeing the fastest lap from today compared to the record.
Today?
So the record was set in 2004 by Michael Schumacher. He was racing for Ferrari at that point, and his lap record was 1 minute and 32.238 seconds, and then the fastest lap today was placed by Fernando Alonso, and it was 1 minute and 37.810 seconds. So, like, just seeing the time difference is kind of crazy. But again, I think wind is obviously a huge factor. And I mean, what was it? Was it sprint quali that it started to rain this weekend?
Yeah.
And you could even see, granted, this would happen at any race course when it rains. You could just see how, like, it was adding 30 plus seconds.
Yeah, it was a shit show.
To people's times. But yeah, so still in place, a 2004 record. I love when they're older and they're still in place.
It's really cool when it's, like, even older.
Mm-hmm.
What was it? There was one of them where the record was set by...
the Mexico City?
Someone from, like, the 60s or something, and it made no sense.
Yeah, there's a few of them that are, like, crazy.
Yeah.
Like, early 90s, too. Anyways, so there are 16 turns on this course, and then there are 2 DRS zones. So DRS detection zone 1 is between turns 11 and 12, and then the activation starts halfway between turns 13 and 14. And then the detection zone 2 is right before turn 16, and then activation starts after turn 16, and that start-finish straight. So I feel like DRS zones, like, kind of another thing we're learning as we learn more about the sport. I feel like they're all kind of in the same spot. They're all typical.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, that is the Chinese Grand Prix information about the track and the weekend. So yeah, let's get into free practice.
So, free practice, we both only really have one thing to mention from it because nothing crazy really happened. And since we haven't been here in 5 years, it was really just a session for people to, like, actually
Learn.
figure out the track.
Yeah.
But there was a fire during the free practice session. It wasn't the only fire.
Yeah, it wasn't the only fire, but 45 minutes into the session...
No, 45 minutes left.
45 minutes left, thank you. 45 minutes left, the red flag was raised because there was just a fire in the grass
just
at turn
burst into
7.
flames.
I don't know if it just literally spontaneously combusted. That was what was being said when we were watching. But I'm also just curious. We've all seen how many sparks are coming off the back of the cars. Who knows? But the surprising thing is that Shanghai has been getting a ton of rain.
Yeah,
and
so they were like, it shouldn't even be possible for the grass to be on fire right now because it's so wet.
Yeah. But besides that, I think there are a lot of drivers on the grid who have never been at this race course before, so a lot of them were dipping their toes, just trying to figure out the turns.
Well, and some of the track where it used to be like actual road, now like over like the white line, now it's gravel. And so a lot of them have to get used to not having like the extra runoff basically. And because I think they didn't have as much practice time, you definitely see the results of that later on.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's going to be interesting for the other sprint weekends, especially Miami. The next Grand Prix is a sprint weekend. I'm curious to see how they utilize free practice.
Yeah.
Compared to what they've done this weekend because, again, they know Miami. They've been coming to Miami. Whereas, again, this, like, a lot of the guys needed this, and this is their only practice session.
Yeah, luckily, at least this year, with practice sessions on sprint weekends, it's not the last time that you can actually make changes to your car, so you can make changes all the way up until in between the sprint and qualifying for the actual race. So I think that gives people a little bit more breathing room, because I feel like in the past, like, it was like a mad rush to get to free practice so that people could figure out if they need to change anything about their cars.
Well, and then I think the final thing to note about free practice, too, there were a lot of upgrades brought to this Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And so a lot of teams were kind of tweaking and figuring out what part of these upgrades were working and what wasn't. So, yeah, super uneventful besides the spontaneous combustion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can go into sprint quali now, because free practice was quite literally 2 seconds. So, the sprint quali, it didn't start raining until the third section. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Let me keep
I believe so, yeah. It was just, I think it was the...
No, SPQ. Oh my god, SPQ. Sprint qualifying 2. There we go. Rain started at the very end.
Oh, maybe... Okay.
George made a comment.
Yes, no, I see that in my notes as well. So yeah, also to note for the sprint qualifying, there are tire requirements. I don't remember this being a thing last year. So during SQ1, everyone has to have mediums on. SQ2, everyone has to have mediums, and SQ3, there's softs. For SQ1, I would say the big one was that George almost went out.
Yeah, he was in knockout range and then was able to find the speed. I definitely think Mercedes
Is struggling.
kept having moments in qualifying. Not only for the sprint but for the main race. Yeah, I I don't know what's going on. I feel like we say the same thing every weekend. And I hate it because, again, like, we're just fans, so, like, we have no inside scoop. But it's just...
It feels like we're hating on Mercedes all the time.
Well, I don't think we're hating on Mercedes.
Yeah.
I just think that... I think we're seeing a team that has had a really incredible run.
Yeah.
Struggle really hard.
Yeah.
And not even struggle hard in the sense of, like, what Williams is dealing with. Like, I think they're just struggling not being in the top. And I also feel like they have not been able to get to the bottom of what's going on with their car.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I feel like the only other thing I have was that Zhou was able to, for the first time ever, move past Q1. Granted, it was sprint, but we're going to consider it regardless. And then...
It was very exciting.
This was where the second fire was. There was a fire on turn 3 right at the end.
Yeah.
So
then it started raining, so it would have gone out eventually.
Yeah.
If they hadn't gotten it out.
But, unfortunately, knocked out in sprint qualifying 1 was both Alpine, so Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, and then Alex Albon, Yuki Tsunoda, and the other Williams, Logan Sargent.
Yuki was having a hard weekend.
Yeah, did Yuki get a new chassis as well? Because I believe...
Danny did, because Danny asked for one.
Yeah, so... Not sure what happened on that end because he had such a great performance in Japan. So.
Yeah, I think he's gotten points for the last 2 races besides this.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what's really going on with him. SQ2. Who went on SQ2? I can't remember.
So, SQ2 was delayed because of the fire. And then, basically, because of this delay and then the impending rain, because there was rain on the radar, the freaking lineup to get out of the pit lane was insane. But it was ironic, too, because the Red Bulls just stayed in their garages with their tire warmers on while everyone waited 3 minutes prior. So sometimes I feel like people jump the gun.
And then sometimes people are a little too calm.
Yeah. So, rain began, and George Russell was unfortunately unable to get a clean lap. But we did see someone special move on to Q3.
Yeah, Zhou moved on to Q3. And I swear, when he would drive past the main grandstands, the sound of the crowd was insane.
Yeah, no matter what he did.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. So knocked out that round was George Russell. Again, he couldn't get that clean lap. Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg, who was surprising because I feel like he's done pretty well.
He's usually a really good qualifier.
Which I mean, still in his place, it's not horrible.
Yeah,
it's not fantastic either. Danny Rick did not move on yet again, and Lance Stroll.
I will say though that this is the first time this year that Danny has outqualified Yuki.
Yeah, he seemed to just have a better feel for the car from our perspective.
Maybe the new chassis really did do something for him.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But again, also, Danny has raced here before.
Yeah.
So Danny has experience.
I'm interested to see how he is in Miami. He's won it before this race.
He's won the China Grand Prix, I think, 2018?
Yeah.
So knocked out. Did I say who was knocked out? Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Jesus Christ.
So then SQ3 was when the rain was really, really intense and everyone had to go out on inters. And it was an absolute shit show.
Yeah, so you saw the times drop like 30 seconds, which is the first thing we noticed.
People were doing like 2-minute laps.
It was like 2-minute laps, and then you could just tell people just needed to get times on the board.
Well, and it's interesting because that's when all of the commentators were saying, like, this is the moment where it shows the skill of a driver and not the speed of a car. Because everyone's car kind of, like, levels out almost during rain because it's just so slippery and the cars were not made for that kind of weather. And it
becomes so incredibly technical when it's raining. just to understand your
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think experience and I don't want to say skill because I think all the drivers have a huge amount of skill.
Yeah.
But I think you could see because Lewis had such a great performance in Q3, and Lando also thrived.
Yeah,
in the rain.
didn't his time get deleted at first, and then
Yeah.
it got reinstated because I believe he went off on the track at some point. But it didn't like it didn't give him anything extra.
There was no
It slowed him
benefit.
down actually. So technically, the rule is if all 4 tires are over the white line and it like benefits you, then your time will be deleted. But if it doesn't benefit you, then your time is fine. And so it was reinstated, and Lando actually ended up on pole. It was interesting to watch the Red Bull struggle a little bit, but
Yeah, Max could not get a clean lap in.
yeah, he wasn't even in the top 3.
No, and I think, I mean, we hear on the radio, granted, we're not listening to his radio the whole race, but I feel like you hear him get inconvenienced a lot by the little things, and I feel like rain is a pretty big thing, and
Yeah.
I feel like that inconvenience, that can kind of, like, rattle the nerves.
Yeah.
So Lando, like Emma said, Lando ended up in pole position. Lewis was in second, Fernando in third, Max in fourth, Carlos in fifth. So definitely interesting to say the least. I think the rain added something extra.
Yeah, I got very excited thinking that this was like a Lando pole, even though it's just a sprint race, a Lando win. We'll tell you that about that in the next segment. In our sprint.
In 22 seconds.
Yeah, in 22, not even, because for you, it's edited so that it's immediately afterwards. So, on to the sprint. All right, so for the sprint, Lando did not exactly have the best start. So Lewis's reaction time.
No. He had a good start, but then
Lewis's was better. Lewis's reaction time, because Lewis was P2, his reaction time was like 0.26, and then Lando's was 0.27, and Lewis had the inside of the track, which is technically the dirty side of the track, but getting the inside line makes it a little bit easier, like when you're trying to get around that first turn. And with that better reaction time, Lando was just not able to compete really with Lewis at that. And so Lando was trying to get back to second place, trying to get back to first. And was battling Lewis all the way through that first turn, but Lewis just completely pushed him to the side, and Lando ended up, I think it was in 7th or 8th, because Lando like ended up going off the track a little bit, and everyone just flew past him.
Yeah, he ended up tumbling off the grid, and then ended up coming back on in 7th place.
It was one of those moments where it's like, we love that you committed to it, but maybe don't always commit.
Well, and I think it's probably that, I don't want to say it's like a game of chicken, but it's like who's gonna pull out first. It's a game of chicken.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely made for an interesting start.
Yeah. Well, and then Carlos was battling with Max, and at that point it was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to be a Red Bull track. But then Max had a battery issue.
Well, yeah, so that was the thing. Like, Max commented pretty early on that he was having battery issues, and then, like, within the 3rd lap, it was gone.
Yeah.
And when he was asked about it in a post-race interview, they were like, you know, you could kind of see the interviewer was kind of trying to be like, are you going to have these issues the rest of the weekend? And he was like, no. Like, by, like, 3 laps in, we fixed it.
Obviously.
And it was like, oh, damn it.
And then on lap 8 is my next note. I talked about how Max was able to pass Fernando. Fernando was kind of holding up the pack for a while. There was, like, a it was a pretty big like DRS train behind him, and Max was the one who was initially behind him, and it took him until lap 8 to be able to pass Fernando. But once he passed Fernando, he kind of like blew past him.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what, like, Fernando started to realize that he didn't have the pace to keep up with them.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Lap 9, that's when Max took the lead. Hence, he just blew past everybody, which was so fun to watch.
I mean, I think I don't know anyone that's watching from like to see who wins anymore.
Yeah, second
know.
place is the best of the rest.
Yeah, I just like it must. I feel like moments like these, it must be fun for him when he's like in the pack. But
Yeah, but then once he's out ahead, I feel like I would get so bored.
yeah,
It's like years of it.
the things he must think about.
Yeah. Do you remember last year during a race where he was like, should I come into the pit and give the pit crew some practice?
Oh, jeez.
Lap 16, that's when Checo, Carlos, and Charles were all able to pass Fernando. I think it's Carlos was the one battling Fernando at first, and because of Carlos battling Fernando, then that gave Checo and Charles room to actually pass Fernando, and then Carlos then also passed him. But that's when lap 17, Fernando went into the pit, and he actually retired. I don't remember what was wrong with his car. Do you have notes on that?
No, I just remember that he retired. I don't remember what happened. I feel like I think he had a puncture or something.
Yes, he did have a puncture.
But there was also another moment that I want to talk about in the sprint. Lewis struggling, stating that this thing won't turn in the low speed corners, which like obviously we know Mercedes is struggling in that front, but you could just see him physically fighting with the car.
Yeah.
Like it was crazy, and actually to like see his turns compared to the other drivers.
Oh yeah.
Like, I don't know if they need to up that power steering or what, but, like...
I have no idea.
He's, like,
it looks like
physically wrestling.
Yeah, it's kind of like how they explain, like, F2 cars are, like, physically hard to turn. Like, I almost feel like that's what the Mercedes looks like right now.
Yeah.
Which is probably not a compliment.
I'm sure they'll...
Figure it out.
Or next year...
So, on lap 17, when Fernando had gone into the pit and retired, we see a pretty interesting fight between Charles and Carlos. I think Carlos has decided that he does not give a shit.
I don't think that... Okay, I see why people are saying, like, he doesn't give a shit.
But not in a bad way.
Yeah, I think it's less I don't give a shit and more like...
I'm trying to get a job.
I'm gonna give it my all.
Well, and so we saw the meme that was going around yesterday where it was a photo of Carlos in the press, like talking to press after the sprint, and it was him being like, "What are you gonna do? Fire me?" He didn't actually say that, but it was a funny meme about that because it's like, well, I mean, if he doesn't listen to, I don't think we heard anything about team orders, anyways.
No, I also feel like this is the first weekend, and granted, Charles is
where Charles is able to compete with Carlos.
Well. I also feel like where they were able to compete, but also where they were both struggling equally.
Yeah.
Like, I think they both had issues later on in the main race. I think they were both having issues in the sprint. Yeah, I felt like there was a comment that was made where, and granted, one thing to note is, like, these are things that are said in the heat of the moment when they're driving a vehicle at, like, a ridiculous speed, and they've been doing it
Their adrenaline is pumping.
Yeah. But, like, he said something along the lines of, like, why is he always fighting with me? And it's
he was like, he's fighting with me more than anyone else, which I disagree with. I think that he's fighting with everyone, Carlos. I think he's definitely, like, he will battle you on the track.
But I almost feel like, in Charles' defense, I almost feel like it was, like, something anyone would say in frustration of, like, oh my god, let me the frick pass.
Well, it was almost like, do you not remember Monza last year, Charles, when Carlos had been beating you the whole race, Carlos had been beating you, and then team orders allowed you guys to fight it out? I don't know. I think that Charles said something afterwards where he's like, yeah, we're fine. Like, we'll talk about it in a team meeting and we'll be okay. Like, we always, like, we're adults and we're always civil. Like,
I mean, I
nothing's
would
any
hope,
crazy.
yeah.
But it was definitely, like, a strange thing to watch.
Especially when, like...
I think Fred allows them to battle it, which is great, because it makes it really interesting. But, and I don't think that it's going to turn into like a teammate rivalry, like Bro-Sadie's kind of thing where it gets toxic. I don't think that that's either one of their personalities,
No.
honestly. But yeah, it was definitely just weird.
Yeah. That's really all.
I think they almost had contact at one point in a turn, but then they didn't.
But again, also, it's not the first time that they've been like this.
Yeah, they've done this before.
Yeah, so...
I think Charles is just verbally getting frustrated.
Yeah. I'm sure it's frustrating when you're seeing, like, the teammate that's leaving, and also... I mean, we see the comments online where people are like, you know, they chose the wrong, like, guy. I'm sure that gets to his head.
I hate those comments because, like, as much as I'm a big Carlos fan and I don't think that he should be, like, moved out of his seat, I don't think, like, the people are being like, Charles doesn't deserve a seat at Ferrari like Carlos deserves it. I think that's some bullshit. Like...
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's insane to say. So, the last thing I have to say about the sprint was it's really funny that Max was having battery issues at the beginning because he ended up winning the race by 13 seconds.
Yeah, that's why it was like, dude.
And what was it, 19 laps or something?
Did you forget to, like, hit a button?
Yeah, and he won it by 13 seconds and 19 laps.
Yeah. Anyways, so the top 8 are what score points in the sprint weekends for those who are new. So in first place was Max, second place was Lewis, third place was Checo, fourth place was Charles, fifth place was Carlos, sixth place was Lando, seventh place was Oscar, and eighth place was George. And Zhou just missed the
I know,
points.
it's so sad.
But still, I think a ninth place position was incredible.
Was phenomenal, yeah.
And the only car to DNF was Fernando.
Yeah.
So
and Danny P11, which is really good for him right now.
Yeah.
So I think he needed that.
Yeah, so I feel like there were good things and bad things that came out of it. But again, I just feel like by the time I finished watching the sprint and then went into qualifying in the race, I forgot that the sprint happened.
Yeah.
Because it just felt like such a, like, side quest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I like this.
I think I need to get used to it. There's only, 7 sprint weekends or something like that? So we'll have to get used to it.
Yeah.
I know Miami's a sprint weekend, I'm pretty sure. So that's the next race weekend.
I guess I'll learn to live with it.
All right, now we are going to go into qualifying. So, qualifying. My main stuff that I really have is the results information. So we can discuss it. Let me read the results for you guys. In Q1, also it wasn't raining during this qualifying, which does change things. And it was only about 4 hours after the actual sprint race. So just know that people might be tired. It does have an impact on all that stuff. So, Q1, we see Zhou, K-Mag, Hamilton, Yuki, and Logan out. Lewis was the big talk of the day where, like, he ended up getting P2 in the sprint race, but then he gets knocked out at Q1. P18 in Q1. Apparently, they did some changes on his car and George's car between the sprint race and qualifying, and obviously they didn't work. So, yeah.
I do just want to note, the only thing I have was that this was the first time this season that Pierre has moved on.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think it's interesting to see, because again, this was a big upgrade weekend for some teams. I think it's interesting to kind of see the little bit of shuffle that's happening as people are improving or making changes. So hopefully this is good news for Alpine.
Well, and for Alpine, Esteban was the only one who had the upgrades on his car. Pierre did not.
Which I think also, like, goes to show how some teams are making changes and they're probably not always helping.
Yeah.
So, Q2.
Q2. So we see Lance, Danny, Esteban, Alex, and Pierre out. So this is Esteban has outqualified Pierre on every occasion this year so far.
I think so, yeah.
And again, Danny was able to outqualify Yuki. You could definitely feel Yuki's frustration.
Yeah, I definitely think that, there was, he's been calm and collected the first 4 races, and I think this is the first frustrated weekend he's having, but also, again, he might not have had upgrades, but he might have made changes to his car. So, maybe something happened, and it just wasn't, maybe they put it together a little bit differently. Who knows? But I do want to note that, Carlos did end up spinning out during this session.
On the last turn.
And he hit the barrier, which resulted in a red flag.
It was kind of the most insane, spin, though.
And
so
he did maneuver it.
Yeah, so it was the last turn,
driver.
And his, right rear wheel hit the gravel, and then that spun him around, but he, was able to stay calm enough where he was able to maneuver the car so that the rear of the car wasn't the part that hit the barrier. It was the side, because the rear is where it's more sensitive. And so the only thing that happened really was his front wing came off.
The only thing of consequence.
Yeah. Everything else looked to be fine, and so he ended up going in, and
they switched his front wing.
And everything else looked fine, apparently, and he went back out.
Yeah. He went back out, and I think he did a pretty good lap.
Yeah. And he moved on.
I also want to note that Bottas moved on for the first time.
Yes.
Which I also think was really good view on Sauber, and hopefully will bring better things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, did not show a great race, but
yeah.
Q3.
I only have the first 5 results, so I think you have the full 10, so you read the results.
Yeah, so Max ended up getting pole. Surprise, surprise.
Shocker.
Perez, oh my god. Checo was in 2nd, Fernando was in 3rd, Lando was in 4th, Oscar 5th, Charles 6th, Carlos 7th, George 8th, Nico Hulkenberg 9th, and Valtteri Bottas was in 10th. Oscar did actually have a small slip where Carlos messed up, but was able to catch himself. And when we watched, I can only imagine how he might have slightly crapped himself.
Yeah,
just because,
he definitely did.
Yeah. If he didn't, maybe his heart was racing. But he's definitely clenching.
Yeah.
So it was not really crazy. Again, I feel like I don't know if it's...
The only crazy thing is that McLaren came into this weekend saying that this was going to be a horrible weekend, that they were just going to have to, brace for damage control, that, it was going to not be good at all, and then they ended up qualifying P4 and P5. So, very unexpected from them, and the Ferraris qualified behind them, which was definitely unexpected.
Yeah, I feel like if you want to, trick new friends that are watching F1 for the first time, you could be like, oh, they're gonna do great every single time he says they're gonna do awful, because that's what they do. Yeah. Every single time they say they're gonna be awful, they end up doing a pretty decent performance. But I also don't know if it's just I don't know, because they get the data. I don't know if it's the way the Sims are projecting it or what, but
I have no idea.
It's every single time they say that they're not going to do great,
I think their car's faster than they think.
Yeah. They just have to believe.
All right, let's get into the actual race.
First thing to note that I didn't even catch when I originally watched it, because I don't know if we ever talked about this, but on F1.com they give you a full written kind of as it happened race notes. So I caught this in the race notes. But Logan started from the pit lane so that Williams could experiment before Miami. Since Miami's sprint weekend, I don't know what they did to it, but they wanted to play around with the car a little bit more.
Yeah, and he was already supposed to be starting P20, so, like, starting from the pit lane, it's not going to make much of a difference. Yeah.
So that's the first thing I have.
Yeah, the first thing that I have was that Fernando had a great start, first of all, and took first pretty much immediately, right?
I thought Max took a clear lead.
Maybe he did. Anyways. Well, where did he start, Fernando?
Fernando was in third.
No, Max took the clear lead, and Fernando passed Checo.
Yeah.
That's what it was. All I wrote down was that Fernando had a great start. So, doesn't really tell me much.
That's not my fault.
I'm sorry,
I
I was half asleep when we were watching this race, okay? Both the Ferraris went down a bit after the start.
Yeah.
But overall, it was a clean start. There were no crashes. There was nothing.
I'll be honest with you. For the first 16 laps,
it was boring.
Nothing really happened.
They were all just following each other.
Except for the Gasly pit crew incident.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, so for those that didn't watch, or for those that did watch, we'll discuss it. Pierre pitted, and when he pitted, I don't really know how to describe it because unfortunately I am not a pit crew member.
Normally they have this like thing that they put underneath the car that lifts the car up, and I guess it somehow like slipped or whatever.
Like it looked like the car slipped.
It dropped
off.
back down, and a tire like shot out basically at one of the mechanics, and he fell over.
So it's like a pulley system that lifts the car, and when the car drops, from my understanding from listening to them talk about it, when the car drops, it's an indication to the drivers you're good. It's like a universal sign, like it's just their natural instinct. I think that unfortunately the car fell instead of being lowered. One of the rear tires was not completely on.
It wasn't on at all.
It was not at all. The car shifted forward, which pushed the tire and the car mechanic.
Yeah.
Everyone was fine. The car mechanic was safe. Everyone was fine. But it did result in, obviously, a slower pit stop.
Yeah.
But the FIA did look into it. I'm not sure if anything resulted from it.
I don't think so. The mechanic is okay.
But I was just shocked. Like, I'd never seen it, like, in that kind of situation before. Something that I didn't know, the tires are, 22 kilos?
Yes. No, 22 pounds, right?
22 pounds.
Didn't they say they were 10 kilos?
Yeah. They're 10 kilos.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, they said they were 10 kilos, so that's 22 pounds.
Yeah. So, like, if that's coming off at, like, I mean, it's not that heavy, but if you're not expecting
I feel like they gotta be heavier than 22 pounds. They look way heavier than 22 pounds.
They have to be.
It was something else.
I also
probably.
don't know the weight of a regular, like, civilian car tire, so
it's
I'm
definitely heavier than 22 pounds.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Someone look it up.
Yeah, that's not for us to do. Yeah, the majority of what was going on for the first, 15 laps was, people just passing each other. Like, Checo passed Fernando at lap 5, and then lap 7, Lando passed Fernando.
It was kind of like the typical settling.
Yeah, it was kind of like the sprint over again, where everyone was just passing Fernando. So he was qualifying really well, but then when it came to actual pace, it wasn't there. At this point, Max was really far ahead already, that Red Bull was actually able to do a double stack pit stop without there being...
They did it twice.
Yeah, they did it twice.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show how far ahead Max actually was. I didn't write down the actual timing of how far ahead he was, but yeah. And then I feel like the next thing that really happened was Valtteri.
Yeah, so around lap 16, Valtteri Bottas halted.
It was lap 21.
It was lap 21? I have lap 16.
I have lap 21.
Oh. Well, between lap 16 and lap 21, it could be 16, it could be 21, it
Who
could
knows?
be one in the middle. Valtteri halted at the turn 11 exit and stated that the engine was gone. Not really sure what happened. The Saubers do use Ferrari engines.
It just, stopped.
Yeah, it just stopped. I mean, granted, there is, like, a runoff at turn 11, which is convenient, but the problem was the car was stuck.
Yeah.
And so they ended up deploying a virtual safety car at first, thinking, like, they could get this. They could roll it off the way the barriers were working. But they physically could not move the car, and there was all of these images of, like, 12 men shifting this vehicle,
It was
which,
quite
like,
funny, actually.
honestly, though, you probably know the mechanics were, like, sitting there, like, screaming or pulling their hair out, because it's like, what are you doing to the car?
It was strange that, like, at first it was a yellow flag.
Yeah.
And so it was basically where Valtteri pulled off. It was in, like, it was right on a turn, and it was just his car didn't turn, like, the engine stopped, so he just, like, went into the runoff of it. And it was close enough, I think, to, like, a runoff, like, road where, like, they could just pull the car over to there. But they normally, if a driver is actually out of the car, it's more than just a yellow flag. And at first it was just a yellow flag, and it was a yellow flag for a while, and then it turned into a virtual safety car, and then eventually it turned into a full-on safety car.
Because they had to get out the truck with the crane.
Yeah.
Which,
it just
like,
took a lot longer than it probably should have. And people were like, this is just reminding us, like, in Australia, it took a lot longer for a yellow flag to go up when George was quite literally, like, halfway upside down.
Yeah. I mean, they're quick to dish out 10-second
Penalties.
penalties, but when it comes to safety cars, like, yeah. It definitely was weird.
But because it was a safety car, like, half of the grid ended up going in to change their tires.
Yeah. I just feel like the safety car played such a role
For Lando.
for so many drivers.
Yeah.
Keeping the grid the way it was. And then restart started around lap 26.
Yeah, lap 26, lap 27. And turn 1, Lance Stroll decided to just ram right into Daniel Ricciardo. This is quite a controversial conversation, I feel like.
As of right now, we're recording this at 5:20 p.m. Central Standard Time on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm confused.
Well, okay, so Fernando apparently had a lockup, and he was at the front of this line of cars, and then that caused him to slow down, but then every other car behind him was, like, very, very close. But with it being a restart, you never know what's going to happen, so you do have to be paying it, like, very close attention. It's not like a regular lap where you can just pay attention to the apex and then you can just make your turn. Like, you can't. And that's kind of what Lance was doing. He was just paying attention to the apex and not about the cars in front of him. And so he did not brake because he didn't realize that Danny was braking. Lance thinks that Danny brake checked him, which makes no sense because Danny was quite literally about to crash into Oscar.
It seems like Aston Martin is kind of dying on that hill, too, because they were doing a post-race interview with Fernando, and he did say that the penalty was strange. I'm just confused because, like, I'm just confused.
Yeah, yes, it was a racing incident, so some people might be like, that's not something that you get a penalty for. I almost think that he got penalized because of his reaction afterwards.
Well, and I do feel like there have been moments where we've seen, I think there was an incident between Lewis and Oscar last year where Lewis felt that the blame was on Oscar and then, you know, went back, reviewed the footage, and actually went up to Oscar and apologized and was like, hey, I was in the wrong. And so I think I was kind of expecting that from Aston. I was expecting this, like, hey, we reviewed, we're sorry. And I'm curious, too, to see, like, what level of data is provided. Like, if they can see when drivers are braking.
They definitely can. They can.
If they can prove this, I don't want to say brake check theory, but brake check theory.
No, there's no way that he could be brake checking him because you're braking into the turn.
Yeah, it just feels like a very strange hill to die on.
Yeah, it was weird.
I was expecting, like, an apology or a little bit of an understanding, but it really just seems like no one's taking ownership.
Well, and there was a good amount of damage from Lance because of that.
Yeah.
And it definitely damaged Danny's car quite a bit. But Danny stayed out. Lance went straight into the pit. And as Danny's still out for another couple of laps, lap 27, so this is immediately after all of this had just happened, Yuki actually spun out because K-Mag, like, tapped him a little bit, and then that caused Yuki to DNF. So this is the first V-carb that's going in, and then lap 34 is when Danny DNFs because there's just too much damage. You just see him dropping
like
through
stones.
yeah. So I'd say the rest of the race after that was, there were like some battles here and there, but it was mostly just make it to the end, I feel like. And everyone was talking about Fernando's strange strategy, and I don't think I was paying enough attention to figure out what was weird about it.
I don't know if he did a 2-stop or a 3-stop. I might have been a 3-stop, but I think it was the fact that he went in for the last 12 laps, went on softs, and then just, like, clocked in the fastest lap, and then just climbed. Like, he just kept passing people.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of just, like, what was the goal? Yeah, I personally don't know what was super strange, because I feel like they can just do whatever
Sometimes they just choose random things, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think people get too caught up in the strategy, but also the amount of safety cars that were introduced, because we did have another safety car again. We had... Sorry, oh my god, my notes are all over the place. So, we had the initial safety car with Bottas, and then we had the second safety car with Lance and Danny.
Yeah.
And so I feel like
that's why Lance was able to go in and come back out.
Yeah, and I feel like the double safety cars, too, kind of make everyone's race plans a mess. But yeah, it was funny, not funny, because after that, after Danny DNF'd, it was just, like, penalty after penalty, so...
Yeah, they just started posting all the penalties.
Stroll got a 10-second penalty due to the incident with Danny, obviously.
And he got 2 super license points added.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I apparently all of these people... I have all of the penalties written out.
K-Mag got a 10-second penalty for the Yuki incident. And Logan got one as well for safety car infringement, which people agree is in the rules, but it's very harsh.
Yeah, so if you see the way that the infringement happened, so Hulk was coming out of the pit lane and...
I thought it was... Logan was coming out of the pit lane.
No, because Logan got the penalty because he was passing Hulk. Yes, so Hulk was coming out of the pit lane.
Okay.
So Hulk is coming out of the pit lane. Logan is obviously driving around the track, and there's a specific line, like, as the pit lane exit line, and once you're past that line, then you're, like, back on track, and when it's under safety car conditions, you cannot pass people. Logan actually passed Hulk because he believed that he was still technically in the pit lane.
It was so close.
Hulk was maybe like 6 inches ahead of Logan. So Hulk was actually had the lead coming out of the pit lane over Logan. And so when Logan passed Hulkenberg, it was technically against the rules, and that's why Logan ended up getting the penalty. And then Danny did the same thing later on, where he passed Hulk under the safety car conditions as well. And Danny actually, in a post-race conference, with the stewards, tried to argue saying that Hulkenberg did the same thing to him during lap 28, but the stewards were like, that doesn't count, or whatever. I don't know, it was very strange. But Danny would have gotten a 10-second penalty for that within the actual race, but considering that he had already retired at that point, he's going to be getting a 3-place grid penalty for Miami for the sprint race. So it's for whatever is the next race that he does. So it's the Miami sprint race.
I just think, like, it's such a weird thing to stack it in the next week. Like, why it wouldn't be a clean slate. Especially since, like, the kid DNF'd. He's not going to score any points.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't...
I think it's for them, it's to try and be, like, a safety thing, like...
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But anyways.
So, I honestly would say this race was not my favorite. Normally, I like a lot of safety cars because it really stirs the pot, but I feel like there wasn't I feel like there was a lot going on, but there also wasn't.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. And I know that other people think that there have been boring races prior. Now, listen, what I said at the beginning of the episode, I loved it. I thought that it was I thought that I was expecting, like, a different vibe.
It was a very different vibe
the way
than
it
I
was
got.
described online, and what we saw was fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was, like, overall, plus, having the racing in the rain is always exciting, something a little bit different. But yeah, I think the physical, like, the actual race itself was pretty
tame,
quiet.
Yeah.
Which is to say something, but I just feel like everything that
I also just wonder if they're tired because of the sprint.
Yeah, I don't know. I am curious to see how to compare them, like, how they're going to be in Miami.
Yeah, 100%.
But, yeah.
All right, let's go into our final thoughts. We were saying the race for us was not the most exciting. I feel like Japan was really exciting. And so I just also love the Japanese Grand Prix. Like, it's one of my favorite tracks. And so for me, I will watch any race there. But for this one, I just was like, okay. Like, I mean, I was very tired, so that's why I was falling asleep. But, nothing crazy happened. Nico Rosberg was there. That's what was crazy.
Yeah, I think it was, overall, I feel like a lot of teams are just still, like, again, I hate to say it because we're 5
Figuring
races
their cars
in.
out.
But yeah, I just feel like it was, like, a lot of, like, experimenting, a lot of figuring it out. I will say, granted, there were a significant amount of safety cars, so that is why the gap is only 13 seconds, but Lando was only 13 seconds behind Max.
Yeah.
And I also just think it's really interesting because Checo was 6 seconds behind Lando, which, 19 seconds behind his teammate. I think that, for me, it's raising some eyebrows. Again, I'm not really sure what they've done to the cars.
In the podium ceremony, they pan over to Lando's dad at one point, and Lando's dad is standing next to, like, all the McLaren people, but then Red Bull's standing right there, Helmut Marko and Christian Horner, and the commentators are saying, like, Helmut Marko has tried to sign Lando several times, and he has said no. And I almost feel like Christian and Helmut probably stood next to him strategically to try and be like, hey, Lando, like, come on over.
What was the funny Lando radio?
Oh my god, his race engineer, Will, says to him at one point
something about braking?
Do something that for engine braking as like a recommendation, and Lando's response was, no thank you.
Yeah, it was just, man. Yeah.
The sassiness of Lando. I loved it. Well, and the cool down room, they actually got to see the video of Danny and Lance's crash.
Yeah.
And Max's reaction to it was cracking me up.
Yeah, it was definitely funny because, I mean, they're obviously not paying attention to the screens.
That's one of the things that I've noticed. Like, even Alex Albon afterwards was like, was it a good race? I don't know. You tell me. I'm not paying attention. I can't see anything.
Well, it's, like, sometimes, too, like, I feel like if Max is in the lead by 20 seconds, you do, like, he has moments post-race interviews where he's like, yeah, I was looking at the screens and I saw this happen, which in and of itself is crazy. But I don't think any of them really saw what happened to Danny and Lance because of when it happened. It was a giant pileup. Yeah. So, their reactions were pretty great, right? Because, too, you could see, like, covered his face and, like, oh, crap, I can't react.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I was saying to Mary Catherine, because I saw some people online talking about it, I wonder how Scotty James is feeling right now with the Danny and Lance situation, considering Lance is his brother-in-law and Danny is his best friend. It's definitely going to be an interesting family dinner.
I wonder how, like, if they have a group chat together, or if Danny's trying to, like, mediate.
Well, he has said,
Scotty.
Scotty has said before that, like, when he comes to race weekends, that, like, he'll wear, like, Aston Martin shirt and, like, a Red Bull hat.
Well, because he's a Red Bull athlete.
Yeah, he is a Red Bull athlete. And so he'll go in to go see Danny, and he'll wear the Red Bull hat, but then he'll go into the Aston garage, and he has to wear his Aston Martin, like, shirt. Yeah. And it must be a little awkward in the family.
Yeah. But I don't know. I feel like it was I hate to say this. I feel like it was a little predictable.
It was a predictable race.
Ferrari struggled a little bit more, but besides
surprising. I think the best part of the race weekend was seeing all of them, like all the Chinese fans and their support for Zhou. So normally after the race, obviously we have the Parc Fermé, like P1, P2, and P3 spots. And they actually had a like Zhou Parc Fermé sign. And so he got to pull up to that sign and like, get out of his car and like wave to the fans. And after he gets out of his car, he just like crouches down crying. And like I think every person I've seen online is like, I sobbed watching this.
Well, and I feel like if you're on any sort of F1 socials, I feel like you'll know this. If not, you might not. But there's a picture that Zhou posted. He was at the very first Grand Prix in 2004. And so to see this photo of him as a kid, we do the get ready for the Grand Prix and talk about, these people's careers to see how they get in. And, we always talk about how these kids start in karting, but,
And he is the first ever Chinese F1 driver, at least that's driven in China.
Mm-hmm.
He moved away from China when he was at least a teen because he had to go into European karting.
Mm-hmm.
And so he definitely has earned his spot. And apparently on the UK broadcast, Crofty was saying, I really do hope that this isn't Zhou's last home race. I hope he gets a few more years here because right now we don't know if Zhou's going to be signed for next year and we don't know if he'll have a seat for next year.
Yeah.
I really do hope he does have a seat. I think, unfortunately, with the team that he's at, he has been given just bad cars every single time.
I think I kind of agree with what you said earlier, too, in the sense that if Logan has a seat next year and Zhou doesn't, I think it's going to be a little frustrating. Obviously, negotiations and conversations with teams, they all happen separately from each other. Yeah. So who knows? But I just think, I just feel like he's had a meh car and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like he's typically, performing relatively close to Valtteri, and we know how good of a driver Valtteri is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was really my sum up of the weekend.
Yeah, so the next race we have is not this weekend, but the following weekend, and that'll be the Miami GP. That is also a sprint weekend, and it is an F1 Academy weekend. So for those that are following along... Go ahead, watch that, support women in motorsport, we all should be, support anyone in motorsport. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a lot. I think I'm complaining now about China's sprint weekend, but I think a sprint weekend with F1 Academy, I think my brain is going to melt out of my ears.
100%. We're not going to be able to do, the Miami GP,
we're traveling too.
We are traveling as well. We have a lot going on that weekend. Yeah. So it's going to be very overwhelming trying to watch everything. And
the irony too is that the weekend that the race is happening and we're in the same time zone as the race. Not where we live, where we're going to. We're going back to New York. We can't watch it on time.
No, because of, it starts at 11:30 or whatever.
Because I think the day of the race we'll be flying.
The day of the race we might be home by then.
We might be home, but then Saturday we have family stuff, so.
Yeah.
Yay.
So fun. At least it's not like when we flew
to
Hawaii and we were watching the Italian Grand Prix sitting on the floor of the Honolulu airport.
Yeah.
So.
The things we do.
I know.
For this sport.
I know.
As mere fans.
I know.
With no skin in the game.
One last thing. We were talking about this yesterday, and I just want to give you guys a heads up that eventually we were talking about stickers. Our sticker conversation.
Oh, you were talking about stickers.
Our graphic designer, MC's husband's going to make us stickers.
This wasn't even a conversation. We went to a concert last night. I went to the bathroom. Comes out. There was stickers from another podcast. And Emma goes, what the hell? Why don't we have stickers? And I'm like, I didn't know that this is a requirement, you know?
Yeah, so we want to get stickers and post them all over our city, everywhere we go. Just carry a roll of stickers around.
Ugh, that feels like vandalism.
I mean, if it's in like a concert hall bathroom, like the doors of the stalls are just covered in stickers and stuff.
True.
So like, what's the difference? And like in New York City, I feel like there's stickers like all over like lampposts. And
So
shit.
we're just gonna add to the crime.
Yeah, we are.
Cool.
We're criminals. Anyways, that's it for today, guys.
So we're gonna work on the stickers.
Yeah, we are gonna have
Possibly.
stickers.
One
It's
day.
not possible. We are doing it.
In like 3 years.
No, we're doing it. Alrighty. Bye, guys.
Bye.